specific title was Radio Man Third Class. And Gene, I'm going to turn it over to you now to tell us your story, if you would please.
Well, I'm the elder of two sisters, and in the 1940s, during World War II, for women, your choice of occupation was either to be a teacher or a nurse. That's about the only occupations that were available for women. And my sister knew from the day she was born she wanted to be a nurse. I didn't want to be a nurse, and I didn't want to be a teacher either, and I wanted to go to college. My folks couldn't afford to send me to college. So after high school, my mother had, she was born in Prince Edward Island, Canada, and came to Boston as a young person and went to business school. And for her, shorthand and math was always it was a great trade for her. She liked it very much. And she would very much like for me to have liked it too. And so in high school, I took the commercial course at that time. So I took bookkeeping and shorthand and such as that. But I also took Latin and biology and other things that I might need in case I should go to college. And after I graduated high school, to please my mother and father, I went to the Stone Business School in New Haven. And I hated every minute of it, and eventually quit. I said, it's foolish for me to be going here. So then I went to work. I got a job at the Yale University Library, and I worked in the library at a kind of a do-nothing kind of a job. I liked it. I liked the folks, and I liked working in the library, but there wasn't much future to it. And so one day at noon in November 44, the Coast Guard was having a birthday party at the railroad station. The Coast Guard recruiters were at the New Haven railroad station. And another girl that I worked with and myself went to the party, and we both wound up joining the Coast Guard. And so that's how I came to join the Coast Guard. I might just as well have joined the Navy or the Army, but the Coast Guard was there, and that's how it happened.
I see.
And in order to enlist in the service, one had to be 20 years old. You had to have your 20th birthday. And so I had to wait until we started the process, but we had to wait until I had my 20th birthday, the 3rd of December, before I could actually sign the papers. We had to go to New York City and take tests to show whether we would qualify for the service. And we had to have a physical there too. And so that's what we did. And then on, I think, the 14th of December, we left. We had to go to New York City, and we met up with the enlistment group, and we boarded a train and we're on our way to Palm Beach for our boot training. And we didn't have Pullmans. We had to sit up at night all the way, but it was a troop train that we were on. And so we did that, and then eventually we arrived in Palm Beach at 9 or 9:30 at night, and they brought us to the training station and got us all assigned to a room. My room was on the 5th floor, and we weren't allowed to use the elevators, so we had to climb up the stairs to the 5th floor, and that was had to do that several times a day. And then we had reveille in the morning, or I'm not sure if it's reveille in the morning or at night, but anyway, the bugle blew in the morning and got its way, blew in the courtyard of the hotel, and we got up and we went to breakfast and such, and then we had classes in Coast Guard history and military, military discipline. And well, those were anyway, we had classes during the day, and we had to be assigned tasks to perform too. So I was in the dishwashing department, and we had to lift the trays of dishes after, not dishes, but trays that we ate on. We had to lift the trays of trays, put them in the dishwashing machine, take them out and put them away, and that sort of thing. And that was kind of hard with our tough arms, with our inoculations. They were kind of swollen and sore. And then we had a drill, and we had phys ed. We all had Coast Guard bathing suits, one-piece bathing suits that had a little Coast Guard sticker down on the right-hand side. And we had a white bathrobe kind of thing. And we'd put those on, and we'd march from the Hotel Biltmore, which was where our training station was located, and down to the shore. And then we'd do exercises on the beach, and then we'd come back and go back to our classes, or back to taking care of the dish trays again. And then we'd have inspection once a week, room inspection. And we had to have everything neat and tidy then. Our clothes were all rolled, and we had to be sure that our beds were made just so, and everything had to be proper for the captain's inspection. There were 6 of us in a room, 3 double sets of double bunks, 6 of us in a room.
6.
And then when we finished our boot training, that went on for about 6 weeks, I think. And so then when we finished our boot training, we were in the process of, the Coast Guard was in the process, they were going to be closing the training station in Palm Beach, because the war was getting towards the end. And so some of them were assigned to yeoman school, stenography and such as that. Some were assigned to storekeeper school. Some were assigned to different Coast Guard stations throughout the United States, because at that time women weren't allowed to go overseas. All the women could serve was in the U.S. The Coast Guard did have a group that went to Alaska, and I think to Hawaii too. And but anyway, so I was on the detail. I worked as a steward's mate for serving the officers. We used to go and get their breakfast ready and get their tables set up and set out for them and such as that. And that was kind of nice, because it wasn't quite so crowded as what we'd been doing before. And then they announced that anyone that was interested in going to radio school could take a test. And if you were accepted, then you might go to radio school. So I was interested in that. And I took the test and luckily passed. And so then I was assigned to radio school in Atlantic City. So I went from winter in Florida to the summer in Atlantic City. And I was in class SPAR 6 in Atlantic City. And that was a big training base for the Coast Guard men too. And so,
what was the name of that base? Do you remember?
Coast Guard, I guess Coast Guard training station for radio school.
Okay. And that was Atlantic City.
Atlantic City, yeah. And but we were all housed in a little small hotel called the Ben Franklin. I have a picture of that, and it's a miracle that we didn't burn down that little old hotel. but it was three floors tall, and you entered on the ground floor, and then you went up a flight of stairs, and then rooms were on the second floor and the third floor. And while we were there, then we went to classes in the morning and afternoon, And we had drill time too. We drilled on the boardwalk in Atlantic City. And it was during that time, that was in, I guess, April, that's when President Roosevelt died. And so we were in a parade in honor of President Roosevelt. And then we finally, I was lucky with the radio school because I already knew how to type. And some of them had to learn the typing as well as learning the code. And so that was, they had a little harder task than I did. But so then when radio school was over, I received my radioman third class commission, non-commissioned officer commission, or whatever you call it. And I was assigned to the Coast Guard radio station in Cleveland, Ohio. And so we had our graduation on Coast Guard Day, August 4th, in 1945. And then we had a week's leave, and then I went to Cleveland. And the Coast Guard radio station was a little place called Gates Mills, Ohio. It's about 20 miles outside of Cleveland. And there were, it was located in a kind of a ranch style type building. The girls were in one end, the bunk rooms were in one end of that building, and the guys slept in a kind of a garage across the street. And so we were all like one big happy family out there. We had wild croquet games that went on between the guys and the girls, and sometimes mixed teams and such. And it was a great experience. It was a nice place. Plus, going into Cleveland was a great city to go in to explore their museums and the lake and such as that. And then and I was there during BJ Day too. The war with Japan ended in August of 1945. And I wasn't in any parade or anything then. We were just out in the boondocks there. They left us alone. And then orders came through for another girl and myself, another spar. We were called, the Coast Guard women were called spars. Semper Paratus is the Coast Guard motto, meaning always ready. Semper Paratus, always ready, S-P-A-R. And also stands for the four freedoms: assembly, press, assembly and religion. I can't even think what the S stands for now. But it's S-P-A-R. And but it's Semper Paratus, always ready. So being always ready, the orders came through for this other spar and I to go to Traverse City, Michigan, to the Coast Guard Air Station there. The commander of the air station needed some radio operators, and he was told that he could have 2 spars. And he first refused to have the women, but then they told him, well, it was either that or we couldn't have any more radio operators. And so then he decided to take us. So the other girl, Phyllis White, and myself, then we embarked on our trip to Traverse City, Michigan. And when we got up there, we were first housed in a private home. The commanding officer and the second in command, I'm not sure what you call them now, both he and his wife, and the second command, he and his wife, both stayed in this same private home. And then Phyllis and I stayed in this same place. And then it was decided that that wasn't a good arrangement for us to be in the same building with the commanding officer. So Phyllis and I then were housed in another private home in Traverse City. And then we stood our watches on the radio watch. I think it was in 3 or 4 watches, maybe. So we went on at midnight, at midnight until 7 in the morning, and then from 7 till something else, and like that. And so we all, Phyllis and I and the radio operator guys, we all were assigned a certain schedule, and we put on duty, and then so that's the way that worked. And then while we were there, I had my 21st birthday on the 3rd of December in 1945. And so the guys had a birthday party for me. It's probably the most memorable birthday party I've had, was with about 100 guys and and all singing happy birthday. And it was a very nice time. And the guys were very accepting of Phyllis and I, and we had a good time. And then she got sick and left, and so then I was left there by myself.
Oh.
But I didn't mind. I mean, everybody was very good, and we had the Coast Guard had a basketball team, and we used to go and on the bus and cheer with them, and all. It was very good. It was very good.
Do you remember any details about the party itself?
Well, they baked a big cake for me, and they had a pool table there, and we played pool. I wasn't very good at that, but they had ping pong. I was pretty good at playing ping pong. That was
Any entertainment other than that? Any music? Dancing?
No music or dancing. No, there was nobody for them to dance with.
Yeah, I guess that would have been a little awkward.
So, but I remember the guys. They were very good to me. That was at that time during the war, when your nylons were very hard to come by. We had to wear rayon stockings, and we had if you were lucky enough to get a pair of nylons, you were pretty lucky. And so whenever I would hear that the stores sometimes advertised if they were going to have nylons in, and so some of the guys were good about going and standing in line for me and getting my nylons. They were very good
nice
to me. I was like their little sister, I think.
Yeah.
They were very good to me. And so then the war was over, and then the orders came to go to Boston to the separation center.
Oh, goodness.
And
wow.
So that was the end of my Coast Guard service. And
well, could I ask you a little bit about those radio watches that you stood for 7 or 8 hours long?
Yeah.
Was there any memorable occasion or an incident or a message that you recall?
Nothing up there on the Great Lakes. Was mostly the warships carrying the iron and such as that. But luckily we didn't have any real serious accidents or anything.
Good.
And then when they would go off, they had to put in so many hours in the airplanes too, and of course we would be communicating with the guys in the planes too.
So there were air patrols that you were monitoring.
Yeah.
There were also surface patrols, ships.
Ships out on
lakes.
the lakes. Yeah.
That you were also in touch with.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then plus the administrative messages back and forth, like when it came time to be separating people out from the service, we'd get a message, that John Jones could go to the separation center in Detroit, or this one could go to and then any kind of administrative.
So you must have been very popular, giving good news like that.
Oh yes.
Hey, you can go home now.
Yes.
Great.
And then so that was that. That was the end of my service, and it was a it was overall a really great time. I really enjoyed it. And joining the Coast Guard was probably one of the best decisions I ever made in my life. It was,
Right.
it kind of came upon me happenstance, but going to that party. But it was,
Yeah.
but it was a very important decision, and it was. Oh, and my folks were in favor of it too. I didn't have any opposition to my going. So my mother said, "Are you sure? Are you sure you want to go away, go far away and all?" But she didn't have her sister had been in the Army, U.S. Army Nurse Corps during World War I, so that she was. And my father served in the Army during World War I too.
All right. So you were already joining in with a family of veterans.
So I was going with the family.
Good.
And so that's was the end of my Coast Guard experience. Then my life after the Coast Guard.
Yeah, if you'd like to tell us about that a bit.
Well, then my life after the Coast Guard, of course, my goal was to go to college. That was my whole purpose in going in that wasn't exactly my purpose in joining the Coast Guard, because I thought it could present a career. Maybe the Coast Guard could present a career. And but as it turned out, then there was the GI Bill, and so I could go to college. Great. And so I right away. But that at that time, many GIs were applying to colleges, and the colleges were very crowded with all the GIs going back to school. And so I didn't have any particular any college that I especially wanted to go to. So I sent out applications to several, and the University of Missouri accepted me. And so that's where I went to college, was the University of Missouri in Columbia. And so then I told a high school friend of mine that had served in the Army in the WWII that I was going to Columbia. And so she sent in an application, so she went to. So she and I both went out to Columbia, go to school. We went with no place to stay. We got on the train going to
you went Columbia, out there to Columbia on a train.
On a train.
And then what'd you do? You didn't have a place to live?
Then we had to find a place to live. Wow. And we found a place in Columbia where we could stay temporarily, but it was a temporary thing. But then the woman's sister lived on a farm outside of Columbia, and she had several rooms, and so she agreed to take some students in. So,
good thing, huh?
Yeah. So Catherine and I went and stayed at this farm outside of Columbia, and we had to walk about a mile and a half, I guess, to get to the main highway. And then sometimes there was a bus you could get into Columbia, and other times we just hitchhiked a ride into Columbia. So Catherine had a car at home in Guilford, Connecticut. And so my father, who works for the railroad, volunteered to drive Catherine's car out to Columbia so that we would have transportation to and from school. Okay. And so then he drove out, and on the way the car broke down in Terre Haute, Indiana, and right there he met my cousin's husband. They were in Terre Haute, and he was talking to this fellow that was offering to give him a helping hand. It turned out it was the husband of my cousin, wow. His niece.
Gee,
and
what a coincidence.
So then Catherine and I had to make a trip up to Terre Haute to get the car, because my father then had to go home to Connecticut. Uh-huh. And then I went to finish school in Columbia, and I got
4 years.
Well, I finished in 3 years. They gave, like, I guess you call them, it's similar to the GED test. you could take, and they gave you credit for
Okay.
so many hours of English or so many hours
Right.
of some things, and then
Okay.
so you didn't have to take them. So in three college years and one summer,
Oh,
I
okay.
graduated with a BA liberal arts degree, and then I got a scholarship from the Division of Welfare, the Missouri Division of Welfare, Child Welfare, for 1 year at graduate school. So I went 1 year to the graduate school of social work at the University of Missouri, and you had to give them 2 years of work for the 1 year of school. And I actually worked for them for 5 years.
Okay.
And
What
then
was
I worked
what was your work like
in child welfare.
in that type
Was
of job?
investigating complaints of neglect or abuse, placing children in foster care, placing children in adoption, studying adoptive homes, studying foster homes, that kind of work. And I finished the 1 year. Then at the same time, I had to learn how to drive because I had never learned how to drive.
No.
And so I had to learn how to drive, and I completed that, and then I was assigned to work in Springfield, Missouri, and then I worked in Springfield for 1 year, and then I was assigned to Cape Girardeau, and I worked in Cape Girardeau for 2 years, and then I took the test and became a child welfare supervisor. And so then I was assigned to Rolla, Missouri, and I worked in Rolla for about 2 years, and I there was responsible for services and overseeing services in about 5 south central counties of Missouri.
Oh, okay.
And then
That must have been interesting work for you.
that was interesting, and I loved South Central Missouri. I loved Shannon County and Dent County and the springs and the mountains and all the Ozark Mountains and all. And
It's pretty out there.
It's beautiful out there. It's lovely.
Yeah.
And but then I had to come home. There was illness in the family, so I came home, and then I applied and got a job with the Connecticut Division of Welfare. And then I worked for them for a number of years, many years, and finally retired in 1985.
Wow.
And then I did nothing for a while, and then I felt sort of bored, so I took a part-time job, and I worked as a medical office receptionist. I worked for a dermatologist and with 2 other girls, and I just worked a couple of afternoons or a couple of days a week.
Yeah, good.
And then I decided I wanted to spend more free time. I wanted to spend it up at Prince Edward Island up in Canada. I was into doing genealogy and such, and I wanted the time, so I quit the part-time job, and that's the rest of my life that I've been looking into genealogy and through the years I taught Sunday school, and I don't know what else I did. That's about it.
Sounds like a pretty good adventure you had. Well, to kind of summarize, Gene, we have a few minutes left. I was just wondering if you could describe how your war experience or your military service experience affected your life or your view of the United States as a country or the U.S. government, or how did it affect your life over?
Well, the basic training in military discipline and following orders and such as that has been with me all my life. And one of the things they taught us in radio school was before you ask for help, you'll check the source of power before you do anything else. Before you ask for help or cry for help, check your source of power and be sure that everything is on. And so I've always kept that in mind too, and I've always passed that on to a number of folks.
Very good.
Oh, and then I forgot to, in the process about 3 years ago, I was the marshal for the Durham Memorial Day Parade.
Oh,
and they have a selected veteran each year to be the marshal for the parade. And about 3 years ago, I was the marshal for the Memorial Day Parade. And I belong to an organization, Women of the Sea Services. That's women that have served in the Navy, the Marines, or the Coast Guard. And we hold monthly meetings at the Rocky Hill Veterans Home and Hospital. And we march in the Veterans Day Parade in Hartford every year. And then one year I gave a talk at the Coast Guard Academy, just not to the cadets, but to a group of Coast Guardsmen that were going to officer candidate school.
I see.
And I couldn't believe how interested they were in an old lady from World War II. And one day I was on an airplane. I was coming home, and I got on, and I saw a girl sitting on the plane, and I noticed the shield on her uniform, so I knew she was in the Coast Guard. And I said, "You're a Coast Guard, Coast Guardsman?" "Yes," she said. And I said, "Well, I was a spar." And her eyes just lit up. "You were a spar?" And she couldn't believe it. And she said that she worked in headquarters and that they celebrate the Coast Guard, the birthday, spar birthday every year.
Do they?
And I said, well, I was happy to hear it. And
so were you in one of the very first groups, one of the first classes of spar?
One of the last.
Or you're one of the last.
See, I was at the end of World War II. Let's see where the was.
So they started the spar. Do you know approximately when that was during the war? Was it just
maybe
prior to the beginning?
Maybe in 42 or 43.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
So you were coming in at the tail end.
We were coming in at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I've attended Coast Guard reunions. They have reunions every year for the Coast Guard on the 4th of August. There's a place called Grand Haven, Michigan, and they celebrate. I went to the 200th birthday of the Coast Guard in Grand Haven, Michigan, and marched in the parade there.
Nice.
And anybody says to me, now marching in a parade, I said, I'm marching in a parade, I can't walk across the street.
Well, it's nice to be invited anyway.
Yes. We ride in cars, but
sure.
But I'm not able to march. No.
Yeah.
And,
well, you've done your share of marching, I bet.
Yeah, but it's fun. We love it, and I love being in the parades and waving to everybody, and everyone's very responsive to the women in the service, and I think that the Coast Guard was one of the first groups that opened all of its ratings to women too.
Great.
And I attended the launching of the Coast Guard cutter Spar in Wisconsin. And then after the Coast Guard cutter Spar was launched in Wisconsin, it had to be I want to say floated, made a trip from Wisconsin up through the St. Lawrence Seaway, down around Florida, through the Panama Canal, up to Kodiak, Alaska, which was its home port. No. And the skipper of the U.S. Coast Guard cutter Spar was a woman, Joanne Noonan. And
perfect.
And she was very appreciative of the spars. And then when the ship was commissioned in Kodiak, Alaska, the Coast Guard again invited all of the old spars to come to the commissioning up in Kodiak Island,
Oh.
Alaska. And there were 80 of us made the trip to
Nice.
Kodiak. And then we went out on, she took us out on a trip on the boat.
How nice.
And around, and we heard all about the ship.
Mm-hmm.
And
how long ago was this? Approximately.
6 or 7 years ago.
Yeah. Okay. So you got to get on a ship. Nice.
And so
In
we
Kodiak, Alaska.
Kodiak Island, Alaska. It's a big Coast Guard
Okay.
base in Kodiak.
Yeah.
One of the men in our church is there. Russ Donovan served. I don't know if you know Russ
Oh, I
Donovan.
know Russ. Yeah.
He was in the Coast Guard, and he served in Kodiak Island, Alaska.
Oh, I didn't know that. Huh.
And so
Very good.
that was a big
That was a big event.
big event. And I was lucky to go to that. That was my second trip to Alaska, so that was great.
Oh.
And the chief petty officers had a party for us when we were
Nice.
on Kodiak Island,
Wow.
and they were all lovely to us. And the American Legion had a party for all the spars too, and
Oh boy.
it was wonderful. We were really made to feel like we were very important ladies. They were there from all over the United States.
Excellent.
And
Excellent.
it was great.
Well, I'm so thankful that you agreed to share this information with us and tell your story, Jean. Thank you so much for coming here
I'm
today.
glad to do it.